What is up? Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful day. Back here with some more Resident Evil 4 gameplay for you. And today, I am going to be elaborating more on the content we saw yesterday at the Sony State of Play showing the latest Resident Evil Requiem trailer, as I'm going to deep dive in the whole Raccoon City Syndrome, or basically maybe a combination of what Director Naginichi has called the Umbrella Curse, and the problem it might arise. Now, I'll say this right now, this is either going to be one of the greatest things ever or one of the worst things ever. There's no middle ground. So hopefully they're more on the better side than the latter side, because this can be a problem. And the best thing is we're going to figure it out in about 2 weeks from now. But until then, there's going to be some excruciating 2 weeks, because I'm wondering how they're going to pull off this problem, because the whole reveal of the Raccoon City Syndrome, now with this whole data file I'm about to show you, draws on a huge, big can of worms here. So this was the file that was shown on Sherry's screen when they're asking about what do you know on Elpis. And basically it reads as follows. Report on Raccoon City Syndrome. This report outlines the current research on latent onset T virus syndrome, henceforth referred to as Raccoon City Syndrome. Raccoon City Syndrome occurs when residual T virus within the body mutates over a prolonged period of time. I've yet to find an effective treatment, and when it manifests, the results are fatal. Raccoon City Syndrome appears to develop through the following stages. Stage 0, dormant. The virus lies temporarily dormant within the host due to the presence of specific antibodies. As the virus is not completely suppressed, it begins to build on the immunity to the antibodies over time. Stage 1, activation. The virus becomes active and black. Bruise-like marks begin to appear on parts of the body. Mild symptoms such as general malaise and coughing occur. Stage 2, development. The black marks spread further across the body, occupied with numbness in the affected areas. The marks extend to the internal organs, sometimes leading to hematemesis. Stage 3, terminal. The black marks darken and spread across the entire body. Severe pain and intense fatigue make moving difficult. Vomiting of blood becomes uncontrollably. Patients at terminal stage typically die within 1 to 2 hours. So basically the gist of it is it goes through the stages of the infection. We've seen it on people with black marks on their body. We've seen it on Leon's hand, and et cetera, et cetera. And they also talk about how this is residual T virus that lays dormant in the body that's mutated over a prolonged period of time, and that there is no treatment. And henceforth it's called Raccoon City Syndrome. Basically combine the fact that this all has to come from people who happen to survive and live through the Raccoon City incident, only to have this bite them in the ass many, many, many years later. So why does this become a problem now for the whole grand scheme of things, you might ask? Well, we can deduce now that this syndrome has to affect all people that survive Raccoon City have to be termed infected. They just have to. Especially the ones that were the iconic characters. I mean, there's just no way they wouldn't be infected. That's something we can easily deduce from here. We also can deduce by the fact that if this is something that hasn't had a cure, wouldn't that increase the urgency of these so-called survivors to figure out what's going on and find a cure if their time is running out? Especially if, we've already got reports of multiple people dying and having the similarities of being a Raccoon City survivor and having died the same exact way. So here's my simple question. Where are they? Where are they at this point in time? Now, maybe you can argue, hey, they haven't shown them. And to be fair, I wouldn't want them to. I'd like it to be a surprise. But it's now at the point now where they actually have to show up now. I was perfectly fine with this game being a Grace, Leon, adventure. And maybe you might have someone appear or mention, just because that's fine in its own right. I was fine with remaining a Grace, Leon adventure, even though they were saying they were going back to Raccoon City, because I've stated before that while other characters also have attachments to Raccoon City, I think Leon's is by far the easiest to exploit and the biggest one, because he's the one still deeply personally affected more than any other character because of Raccoon City. He's the one he still can't get over. He still remembers Raccoon City. It affects him the deepest. I know people have stated, Jill has attachments too. Yeah, but I think her deepest trauma came from Wesker and what Wesker did to her. I think for Claire, it's what happened to Steve on Code Veronica. And Chris's biggest trauma was definitely Finn. Obviously, that's a joke, but we know how he got all anal about Finn. But obviously, stuff with Jill nearly dying and Piers. But you get the point. None of them have the attachment and ties to Raccoon City that Leon does because he still can't get over it. So that was fine in that own right. But the problem here is now you have a legit reason of why characters like, Chris, Claire, Ada, Jill, Carlos, the list goes on, the Outbreak characters that were in this incident, they have a legit reason for being here. And it's because they're all slowly dying. So that would beg the question, why aren't they here? Like, what are they doing? Now, I've also heard some people say that, hey, for the sake of argument, I said that Sherry, who is here, another person who survived Raccoon City, I gave the deduction that she might be infected. Keywords might, I don't know for sure, but she might be infected based on what we saw in her having a gloved hand as well and being part of the Raccoon City incident. But I had someone comment that, hey, she has her healing ability, she can heal, she wouldn't be infected. I've also heard some people say that, hey, Jill has her powerful antibodies, she might not have been infected. But think about that logically for one moment. If those were true, wouldn't they be the first people to come after for a cure? And the fact that they don't have a cure, even having that knowledge, wouldn't that mean that maybe this is something that even their powerful healing and antibodies can't cure? Because, that'd be the first thing I would do in that situation. Now, not as you want to say it's just bad writing by Capcom and it's completely forgot. Who knows? And it also gets to the point where it's like, why it's kind of weird for me is Sherry is someone who is got a lot of value of being out in the field. She's got an impressive healing ability. She can heal from a lot of damage. So being someone that has experience and someone who obviously is infected by this whole incident, the Raccoon City incident, why would she be at a computer desk and not out in the field? Now, as you want to say, maybe she's retired. Yeah, but wouldn't this be one of those situations where she would be out there? It's kind of weird how it's like it's only Leon being sent out there, but we haven't heard hightail of anyone else. Now, granted, we can all maybe hope that they're just hiding them really well, but what are they doing in this situation? If they're all infected and they got black marks growing all out of their hands or neck, wherever, and they're coughing up and they're feeling sick or whatever, wouldn't they be questioning, hey, why is this happening? What is going on? Like, why am I feeling this way? And then, with their pool of information networks, they would be like, hey, it's only affecting the Raccoon City survivors that survived the incident. Maybe we should pull our information together and collaborate together. Like, while all this is going on, is, Jill or Ada just, I don't know, sitting on a beach sipping a Budweiser together, like, we're dying. I guess, oh well. Oh, Leon, he's being sent to them. Oh, that's cute, I guess he'll take care of it by himself. Think of it like this, though. What if Leon and Grace find a cure, but because of how this whole infection works, being like when it gets to the last stage, you got, 1 or 2 hours left to live? What if because the other survivors aren't nearby, they couldn't get them the cure in time, and just because they just were so non-active instead of being proactive and, being assertive? And I don't see characters like Jill, Ada, Chris. I know maybe there's a little argument, Chris, he wasn't technically a part of the Raccoon City incident, but he was in that area, so it's, I wouldn't put it past him that him got some, the T virus residual in his body and didn't even realize it. But I just don't see them just sitting around and waiting for their death and saying there's something wrong with them. Not unless you want to say that, and this would be really, I can't even imagine reacting to this. Unless you want to say that, with the exception of Chris, because obviously he's still confirmed alive. Unless you want to say that Ada, Jill, Claire, etc. are already dead. And, others as well, like Carlos and, the Outbreak crew. Like, I don't think they'd go that route because that would just be so underwhelming and just piss off everybody. But with Capcom, I guess it is possible because you never know what they're going to do, for good or for worse. But yeah, hopefully I made those points clear. I don't want this to turn. I know people keep saying, oh, it might be, or they joke about it being like an Avengers Endgame. And no, I don't want it that. But in some shape or form, characters like Jill, Claire, Ada, Chris, etc., those affected by these events, I just don't see how, knowing that this whole event that's now having to affect them by default, they would just sit there and do absolutely nothing and just let Leon do it all by himself with no help, and basically have his faith being Leon and this brand new character who's never been in a situation like this in their entire life. So, yeah, the good thing is we got 2 weeks before we get this answer, so we don't have to wait and antagonize too long. But as I always like to say at the end of the day, that is my opinion. I want to hear your guys' opinion. Does this whole Raccoon City Syndrome put it even more pressure why it would make it weirder that the OG characters wouldn't be involved in this incident if they just don't randomly show up? Would it seem just really lazy or bad writing? Or is it still they're more afraid of the fear of having too many characters, or maybe they can delegate the way they come in and have cool emotional payoffs? Or are they hiding them so really well that we don't know, which will be a cool thing, but only time will tell. But let me know how you ultimately feel about this. But that is going to be it. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video, and hopefully I can see you guys back in the next one. Thanks, and I'll see you all later. Peace.